On this Saturday night, on the brink of a wider war. Israel braces for retaliation from Hezbollah after the IDF strikes hundreds of targets in Lebanon.
We will do everything we can to target those terrorists.
Along with more attacks on Gaza and the West Bank, the escalating fight on 3 fronts. Amazon on fire. Brazil's devastating fire season threatening precious rainforests, known as the lungs of the earth. Implosion investigation. New details about last year's deadly submersible disaster en route to the Titanic. Plus, unprecedented lunar look. What these never-before-seen samples reveal about the far side of the moon.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin with fears the Middle East is teetering on the brink of a full-scale war. Tonight, Israel is canceling large gatherings and enforcing public restrictions ahead of an expected retaliation from Hezbollah. The Iran-backed Lebanese militant group was hit hard this week. Yesterday, Israel launched its largest strike on Beirut since the war in 2006. 2 top Hezbollah commanders were killed, along with dozens of others. Lebanon's health ministry says at least 37 people are confirmed dead, including children. More are still missing as crews search through the now leveled 8-story building in a densely populated neighborhood. Hezbollah has already hit back, and its leader is vowing more to come, fueling fears that these events are just a prelude to another all-out war. Bianca Facchinei has tonight's top story.
Emergency workers searching for survivors of Israel's airstrike in Beirut. The Lebanese health ministry confirming Saturday dozens of people died, including 3 children and 7 women. As some of the dead were buried, Hezbollah, the Iran-backed militant group in Lebanon, said 16 of its own were killed, including 2 high-ranking members, Ahmed Wabi and Ibrahim Akil, the latter a key leader that the U.S. had been trying to track down for 40 years following the bombing of the U.S. embassy in Beirut. A spokesperson for Israel's military confirming their deaths that same day.
The commanders who we eliminated today had been leading attacks on the citizens of Israel since October 8th, and were planning to carry out more at this stage.
The deadly airstrike follows separate attacks on Hezbollah earlier this week that many are calling war crimes. Pagers, walkie-talkies, and other communication devices were remotely detonated, killing at least 37 people and injuring over 3,300 across the country. On Saturday, there were explosions on both sides of the Israel-Lebanon border.
It is not getting better. The war will just keep going, and they will keep bombing. I don't know where we are heading.
Meanwhile, relatives of the Israeli hostages worry over what the increasing tensions mean for a hostage deal.
Today marks day 351 that our loved ones are held captive in the hell that is Gaza. Our hostages were taken alive. Netanyahu, you do not have the mandate to abandon them in Hamas death tunnels under the cover of this new war in the north.
And concerns are growing in Washington, where U.S. President Joe Biden says officials are working on a solution, but adds, we've got a way to go.
The Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, our whole team is working in the intelligence community to try to get that done. We're going to keep at it till we get it done.
And the White House warned Israel and Hezbollah earlier this week against escalation of any kind in order to prevent a setback to what has now been almost a year-long effort to avoid a broader war. Bianca Facchinei, Global News, Washington.
Hezbollah, which in Arabic means Party of God, is an Iranian-funded militant group with deep roots in Lebanon. As the name suggests, it's also a political party, which essentially runs southern Lebanon, including the southern suburbs of Beirut. The group's military wing is one of the most powerful in the Middle East. Estimates suggest Hezbollah possesses between 100,000 and 150,000 rockets. The group has its own media operation and TV station. Canada considers Hezbollah a terrorist organization. In Gaza, meanwhile, an Israeli strike on a school sheltering displaced Palestinians reportedly killed at least 22 people, including 13 children. The Israeli military said it hit a Hamas command center embedded in the compound. The Hamas-run health ministry says at least 30 others were wounded in the attack. The ministry says another 8 Palestinians were killed in a separate strike on a busy market in central Gaza. Turning to the war in Ukraine now, and shocking new video from Russia after 2 large ammunition depots were hit overnight. Take a look at that massive fireball lighting up the night sky deep inside Russian territory. Kyiv says it targeted 2 locations, including one which was reportedly storing munitions from North Korea. A state of emergency was declared in one region, with some 1,200 residents told to evacuate. Russian strikes, meanwhile, killed at least 3 people and injured 15 in the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv overnight. Turning to news here at home now, and day 1 in a hotly contested election campaign in Canada's westernmost province. The BC election wasn't expected to be such a close call, that is, until the BC United Party suddenly folded a few weeks ago, throwing its support behind the Conservatives. Global BC legislative reporter Richard Zussman is tracking the race that's also being seen as a bellwether for next year's expected federal election campaign. And Richard joins us now from North Vancouver. Richard.
It's like nothing we'd ever seen before in politics in this province, Jeff. A few weeks ago, BC United, a legacy party, dropping out of the race entirely. It has set up this race between the NDP and the BC Conservatives. It also will be important for the federal Conservatives and leader Pierre Poilievre to watch what is happening here. Consider Poilievre and John Rustad, the Conservative leader, use much of the same language. They focus in on issues of axing the tax, as well as describing supervised consumption sites as drug dens. The NDP is attempting to get re-elected here. They have been in power in this province since 2017, focusing in on the issues of affordability, housing, childcare, and that issue of public safety. One Rustad says has been a failure here in BC, kicking off his campaign in front of a notorious tent encampment in Vancouver and saying that this issue is one that's key on the campaign trail.
People need to make that clear decision about whether it is tent cities and the crime and the addictions and a collapsing healthcare system and unaffordability, or whether it is hope for prosperity for a better future.
What my commitment is that we will do everything that is possible to ensure that we're delivering the kind of communities that we all want and that we can achieve. Safe communities for everybody.
What is also so unique in BC, the role of independents, Jeff, especially former BC United candidates. There are 5 incumbent MLAs who are now running without a party affiliation, and ultimately they could be the ones that determine who becomes the premier in this province. Is it David Eby or John Rustad? Back to you.
All right, Richard Zussman in North Vancouver. Thanks, Richard. Toronto traffic, the worst in the country, was particularly nightmarish today. The Gardiner Expressway, one of the city's key arteries, has been completely shut down for construction until tomorrow morning. The disruption comes as City Hall and Queen's Park are proposing ways to ease the gridlock. Our Sean O'Shea braved the congestion to bring us the story.
Jeff, in a city where traffic congestion, road closures, and transit delays are daily subjects of conversation, the shutdown of this major route through downtown Toronto is a significant one. The Gardiner Expressway runs from the western edge of Toronto through downtown and just east, and it is closed for 35 hours for repairs. This was scheduled by the City of Toronto, and the decision was taken to shut down the entire road in order to avoid having to close smaller sections over the course of several weekends. It is a big deal because thousands of cars use this road every day. The city was encouraging travelers to avoid coming into the city if possible, or to take public transit, or to be prepared to use smaller roads. Now, as for public transit, that's a problem too, because trains running north to the city of Barrie weren't running because of track repairs, and the city's own transit system is undergoing significant repairs as well. And so certain subway lines aren't running normally this weekend, and transit riders have to use shuttle buses. Here's part of what the city had to say.
Allowed multiple city division all working at the same time. a lot more coordination, a lot more effective and efficient, and it's done around the clock. And it's maintenance work. We need to do it to keep the drivers moving.
Now, this one-time 35-hour closure, according to the city, will take the place of 30 separate overnight closures along this road. According to the city, it'll mean less hassle for drivers, although drivers this weekend may not be quite so sure about that. Jeff.
Sean O'Shea in Toronto. Thanks, Sean. In the U.S., the race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump remains tight, with just 45 days to go until the presidential election. And today, the current vice president formally accepted an invitation to another potential debate. On social media, Harris says she will gladly accept a second presidential debate, set to be hosted by CNN on October the 23rd. Harris says she hopes her Republican counterpart can join her for a second round, but former President Trump rejected the idea.
It's too late to do another. I'd love to in many ways, but it's too late. The voting is cast. The voters are out there immediately.
Trump made his remarks in the key swing state of North Carolina, where a political controversy is brewing. Notably absent was Republican nominee for governor Mark Robinson, who Trump had previously endorsed. Robinson is facing a scandal after CNN reported that he posted numerous racist and vulgar messages on a pornographic website more than a decade ago. Robinson denies making those comments. Difficult questions and tearful testimony this week at hearings investigating the doomed voyage of the Titan submersible. The capsule was carrying a group of deep-sea tourists to the wreckage of the Titanic last year when it imploded, killing everyone on board. It's still not known exactly what caused the disaster. Morgan Black reports on damning testimony that warning signs were ignored.
Tearful testimony from this Titan submersible mission specialist. Renata Rojas saw the doomed passengers moments before the dive off the coast of Newfoundland.
They were just very happy to go. And that's the memory I have.
All 5 people aboard died, 4 paying customers and OceanGate's CEO. The Titan submersible imploded less than 2 hours into a June 2023 trip to see the Titanic's wreckage. Investigators have spent the past week trying to understand why the tragedy happened.
This was a real departure from best practices, and that is at the heart of the matter.
The Coast Guard heard testimony about safety concerns regarding the Titan's design and that the sub had malfunctioned days prior. OceanGate's former director of marine operations says he believes the company put profits ahead of the people on board.
Safety comes first, and any time you're going in a sub, most important thing is going home safe to your families, not going and making money.
The U.S. Coast Guard sharing these new images. The vessel's tail cone resting on the ocean floor 4 days after it went missing. The investigative hearing also revealing the final messages sent. All good here, later dropped to waits, then.
We haven't heard from them, we don't know where they are, where are they? They were very close to Titanic.
Canadian ships and planes joined in the search, the wreckage found days later. Deep-sea biologist Peter Gerges says this dive went against industry norms.
People have a right to build experimental vehicles, and if they so choose, put their lives at risk, but not the lives of others.
Rojas believes OceanGate was sufficiently transparent.
Problems arise. This is never really sold as a Disney ride.
With 1 more week of testimony to come, the board will eventually offer conclusions and recommendations that aim to prevent this from happening again. Morgan Black, Global News, Edmonton.
The dark side of the moon. Coming up, scientists unveil the first ever samples from the far side of the lunar surface. A major environmental emergency is unfolding in Brazil, and more specifically, the Amazon. Months of severe drought are fueling a record-shattering wildfire season in the large South American nation. As Kyle Benning reports, it's forcing the country's leadership to take drastic action.
Achamos aqui. A close call for this ocelot cub, trapped in a wildfire in a rural area outside of Rio de Janeiro. Crews able to recover the spotted wildcat from a blaze as Brazil looks to manage a wildfire season unlike any other. While some animals have been lucky, others have not. The country is facing a prolonged drought, which combined with warm temperatures has seen discoveries of several freshwater dolphins lying on the shores of this Amazonian lake. She says last week we found one a day on average. The research group says the drought through the Amazon has restricted the habitat for the endangered species. And closer to the cities, fires and smoke have created a frenzy across several states. On Tuesday, the country's president allocated more than $127 million Canadian towards extinguishing efforts. President Lula says Brazil was not 100% prepared to take care of this wildfire season. The nation's energy regulator is also pushing forward a policy to push clocks forward to daylight saving time in an effort to conserve electricity. Shallow rivers, particularly in the Amazon, are not producing enough power. In neighboring Peru, more than 16 people have died from blazes. President Dina Boluarte issued a state of emergency in 3 regions, including its part of the Amazon. This as part of an attempt to move resources to the area. And in Bolivia, crops and livestock have been ravaged. This rancher says he's lost about 30 cattle, with another 35 being impacted. It all comes as world leaders gather in New York City this weekend to participate in the United Nations Summit of the Future, where climate change is expected to be top of mind. Kyle Benning, Global News.
Chinese scientists have unveiled mankind's first ever samples taken from the far side of the moon. Nearly 2 kilograms of material was collected during China's lunar landing back in June. They're the first samples humans have ever taken from the other side, and scientists are describing distinct differences from the Earth-facing side. The far side samples are lighter in color, less dense, and have significantly higher levels of glass fragments. Those samples could potentially lead to new theories on the origin and evolution of the moon. Immigration system under scrutiny, from terror suspects to Iranian regime officials. How are so many bad actors entering Canada? We'll ask the immigration minister next. The integrity of Canada's immigration system is under scrutiny after recent arrests of terror suspects and more evidence of Iranian regime officials living in Canada. The immigration minister is now facing tough questions over those apparent security lapses, including from our Ottawa bureau chief, Mercedes Stephenson. Mercedes.
Immigration Minister Mark Miller is on the show after being on the hot seat at Parliamentary Committee this week, answering questions about a summer of terror arrests that have generated questions about the security of our immigration system. Miller says that he is confident in security screening in the system as it stands today, but that there are changes that need to be made.
It's cold comfort for anyone seeing these news announcements about people getting arrested. Know that our public safety agencies did their work in this case and were able to apprehend these individuals. I know that there's lots of questions that abound about what next or what happened. We're heavily constrained in being able to speak publicly about those because we don't want to fetter the ability of the prosecution, of the Crown, to prosecute its case.
One of those changes will be to the international student visa system. So far, the government has talked a lot about changes to the number of student visas being issued, but recent arrests have led to questions about how international students are being vetted and tracked once they enter Canada. I asked Mark Miller about Mohammed Khan, the man arrested trying to cross the border into the United States to carry out a mass casualty shooting and bombing attack on a New York City Jewish center. He was in Canada on a student visa. In the case of Mr. Khan, who was the most recently arrested person accused of trying to carry out a terror attack, he was here on a student visa. Did he at any point claim asylum?
You know, the chronology that we submitted, Mercedes, to the committee yesterday is the only aspect of his timeline and time in Canada that I can comment on.
So you can't tell us whether or not it's true that he claimed asylum while he was here?
I cannot.
Sunday on the West Block, Mercedes presses the minister further on whether the international student visa program has become a backdoor into the Canadian asylum system. Close call. Up next, lessons learned after a Winnipeg apartment building nearly collapsed. Residents of a Winnipeg apartment complex were recently forced to frantically evacuate after it was discovered their building was at risk of collapse. As Melissa Ridgen reports, their story is raising questions about building inspections and maintenance across the country.
Oh, don't look at me like that.
It seems like they've been friends for years, but these women were strangers until near disaster brought them together. One evening in May, chaos, as 200 residents of a Winnipeg apartment were told to grab what they could and get out.
I'm trying to find out where we should go because we have no other place to stay in. We're newcomers to Canada, so we pay here rent fee. We have 2 dogs, we have 2 cars, and now we have to evacuate.
Someone backed into a pillar in the underground parkade, triggering an inspection that found severe structural deterioration in parts of the 60-year-old building, posing risk of collapse.
It could have been disaster. We could have been all dead.
In the 5 months since, many have found new apartments, but others have been bounced from hotel to hotel. Finally landing in temporary suites the Manitoba government is paying for.
It's tiny, for sure.
Yeah.
Are you treated well here?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
But they want to go home.
I have deer in the back outside the parking lot every day. They come for carrots at 4:30. I miss my long balcony. I miss my privacy.
Ladco, the building owner, says they can return possibly as early as mid-October. These tenants hope there are lessons to be learned from their ordeal.
Businesses now should take a big look at their foundation. Seriously. They've got to really consider the age of the building, where it was built, how it was built.
There's been a silver lining in it all, new friendships with old neighbors.
We have now actually started getting together whenever and having a barbecue and a picnic and just all enjoying ourselves.
Looking forward to more of that from the comfort of home. Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
And that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is this rainbow over Niagara Falls, Ontario. We love seeing your Canada, so please email your photos to globalnational@globalnews.ca. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great night.